All right. What are you thinking about?
I'm thinking about guilty pleasures. Guilty. So I'm looking for full-time work right now, and so I've been anxiously going over small talk topics for the last few days. And I've been like laying out my hobbies into different categories as to whether or not I could talk to other people about them and whether or not like I am willing to like claim this thing as something that I watch or that I do. And like what do I have to use in order to gain some sort of like social clout as I am talking to other people? The things that I like, and why am I supposed to feel guilty about them, and why are we supposed to use our like um the television shows we watch and the books we read, why are we supposed to use those to make ourselves look better? And so I've been thinking a lot about the things we hide from one another because we think it'll make us look a certain way.
Well, there's also like who is the arbiter of better?
Exactly, right? Who is this all-knowing judge who gets to decide what is a guilty pleasure and what is just a regular pleasure? So what are you thinking about?
I am currently decorating for Christmas, and it is definitely the earliest I have ever decorated for Christmas. But due to COVID, we're probably not going to have a big family Christmas. And by big, I mean 6 people. And since I work in retail, it was always really nice to go to my parents' house that was decorated for me, and it was beautiful. I'm going to decorate as soon as it's not Halloween, and you're gonna have to deal with it. And also, we need a tree this year. It needs to be a real tree, not like a little tiny tree. We need a real tree. So, it's been funny to do because it's also like today it's 80 degrees out, and yesterday it was like 82, and just starting to deck the halls feels a little stupid. But so welcome to the Professor and the Bookseller, which is presented by Readers Books. This is the fireside chat. So we are obviously the Professor and the Bookseller. I'm the bookseller. My name is Rosie, and I work at Readers Books. I'm the events coordinator, and I'm the children's specialist. Readers is a small, independent, new and used bookstore. It's located in Sonoma, California. We have a website, which is readersbooks.com, and we're also on Facebook and Instagram. Um, we decided to do this because we really love talking about books, and we figured during a time like this we might as well share that love, like just that idea of you're not going to be able to be in a cafe anymore and listening to people talk, so there has to be something that you can eavesdrop on. So you're welcome to eavesdrop on us, which we're happy to provide. So this is Gia.
I'm Gia. I'm the professor side of things. I'm a recent PhD graduate who teaches English. I'm currently teaching in North Carolina. And I used to work at Readers, so I still hold the bookstore very, very close to my heart. And I love, obviously, talking about books. I've made it my job. So I'm very excited that you could join us today, because today we're going to talk about books that have been adapted into movies. And we are just doing movies today. There are lots of different books that have been adapted into TV shows and whatever, but we're just going to do movies. And the first one that we are going to talk about is a controversial one, because we are going to talk about the 2004 movie adaptation of the classic children's book, Ella Enchanted.
So honestly, I don't understand what's controversial about it, except that Rotten Tomatoes says that it's 50% and it should be like, I don't know, 12. Like,
I don't know. I feel like it could get into the negatives. It's a bad movie.
I would say at least 2 casting choices were pretty good,
Yeah.
honestly. But before we get going to the sort of nitpicks of it all, the book itself was one of my favorites growing up. I have just lovely, distinct memories of listening to it on cassette tapes with my mom and my sister in the car, and just the dramatic twists and turns. And I get carsick a lot, and I never got carsick while listening to Ella Enchanted. It is, as the name sort of implies, a Cinderella story, but it's also a story of what does it mean to be obedient. The title character, Ella, is under a curse that was meant to be a baby side blessing, where she has to she has to obey every command given her. So if she's told, be good, if she's told, bring that to me, she has to do it no matter what it is. And obviously that's a very dangerous way to live your life. You could end up being manipulated and used and all of these terrible things. And she's sort of found her way into it being all right. And then her mother dies. And she ends up meeting the Prince of the Kingdom around the same time. And there's this great push and pull between, oh, he's my friend, and oh, I'm falling in love with him, but I can't possibly ever be a princess with this curse on me. Like, think of what horrible things someone could make me do. So she has to basically ghost him, and it's heart-wrenching and it's wonderful, and the end is pretty obvious. And when in 2004 they came out with this adaptation, I was really excited because it would make a good movie. They didn't make a good movie out of it. It was an Elton John song at one point. It's like, this is perfectly reasonable, but not the aesthetic of what this story is at all, even a little bit. And yeah, Anne Hathaway is a pretty nice choice. Like, she was up and coming at the time. Like, she's really cute, but she's not like really, really, really pretty, but she's cute. And then one of the evil stepsisters is this British actress whose name I've forgotten, but she's played like Cinderella's stepsister like 5 times, and she does such a good job being such a horrible person. And so that's 2 people out of a 2-hour movie, which just did not get the point at all, that it had this serious tone of sacrifice for someone that you love, and just became some rollicking adventure that referenced Shrek at least twice.
Well, I was going to say, it feels a lot like a Shrek clone. Like, they knew they couldn't make a Shrek, and so the producers are like, I don't know, let's make Ella Enchanted as Shrek.
Like they kind of went in this horrible direction to try and be really cool and hip. And it's like, you don't need that in every movie for kids. Sometimes you just need a classic story with like fairy godmother who wants to turn people into squirrels. Like, that's all you really, really need. And they wouldn't give it to us. And they probably never will, because now, I mean, the books from 1997, the film's from 2004. I think what people remember more is the film, and everyone thought it was a pretty crappy story. So like, yeah. What a shame is that. Hated that movie. Absolutely hated it. Saw it in theaters. And I hated it.
Yeah. It's like, it's not really of the level even where it's amusing bad. It's just pretty bad.
It's like they tried to make it good. They tried to make it, well, they didn't even try to make it good. They tried to put elements in that would sound good to kids.
It was hip, right? They tried to make it hip.
Yeah, it's like high fructose corn syrup and red number 5. It's not enjoyable unless you have something else in it. It was a bad movie and a good book.
Yeah. And you should go read the book.
Yes.
Maybe pass the movie. Don't pass on the movie. It's not great.
Yeah, read the book.
The second one we're going to talk about, I think, is probably the one that everybody compares other book adaptations to at this point. And so, I mean, if you haven't guessed already, we're going to talk about the Lord of the Rings adaptation. I pulled out both my book collections, so here's all 3 of the novels. And then here's the super ultra extended edition version of the films, which I added up. It amounts to about 700 minutes of film. So keep that in mind.
And
700.
How many of those minutes do you have memorized?
Way too many. The movies came out they started coming out in 2001. They came out when I was in middle school. And I have distinct memories of seeing all of them in theaters. And I remember going to each of them. Rosie, I think you came with me to at least 2 of them. Was it just 2 towers? So let's see. When Fellowship of the Ring came out as a film, I hadn't actually read the books yet. I'd read The Hobbit and enjoyed it, but I hadn't been able to really get through the Fellowship of the Ring yet. But as soon as I got out of the movie theater from seeing Fellowship of the Ring, I ran home and instantly read 2 Towers and Return of the King before the movies came out. Just so everybody's clear, my favorite book is The 2 Towers. My favorite film is The Fellowship of the Ring. There's a difference. I'm sure Rosie is dying to say this. I watched The Fellowship of the Ring approximately 22 times in like 2 weeks. And then of course I also forced Rosie to watch it with me as many times as she would put up with it.
But the other important thing is I have picked up enough from you that we sat down to watch Fellowship of the Rings, and I just spent the whole movie going, did you know this is what this is based on? But I think what's interesting about them is for many people, me included, I find the films much more enjoyable than the books.
Yeah, I think The Lord of the Rings is interesting because I think it's one of those really massive film adaptations that can stand on its own. You don't have to know the novels in order to really thoroughly enjoy the movies. And I don't think all book adaptations manage to do that. I think a lot of book adaptations, they have a lot of kind of references, and there are big pieces of character development that happen in the books, but they don't happen on screen, right? There's just not time. There's no way to show it, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that the reason why The Lord of the Rings is such a successful movie series is they really figured out how to convey everything. And it's not, let's say, accurate, right? There are lots of pieces that they added in or that they changed. And so there are lots of those little details, right, that don't appear in the books, but they managed to really capture the spirit of the book in a way that I think is really, really incredible. And I think that's why they're such a great adaptation, right? Is because the movies stand on their own. And the books, they're very enjoyable, but they're very old school fantasy that we judge everything else by. And I think, The Fellowship of the Ring is an interesting book, arguably a deeply flawed book. I think that Tolkien was getting used to his craft a little bit, and there are some sections there that maybe would be cut out if this book was released nowadays. Two Towers is one of the most beautiful books ever written. I love The Two Towers.
So I've only read all three of them once, and it was while I was working on a farm in Wales. And I probably will never read them again because that was the time that I was going to do it. But like, I'll probably rewatch the movies in a week or two. I'll go like, oh yeah, it's time to rewatch Lord of the Rings, and I'll pick one of them, watch half of it, and then let it go for a while. But they're so timelessly wonderful, and they didn't try too hard in the CG, and it still looks and is as magical as it was, and that it's a rare set of movies that will do that.
We were talking about casting with Ella Enchanted. I mean, the casting in the Lord of the Rings films is like pitch perfect. They couldn't have done better, and that's I don't know, that doesn't happen very often. So on top of all of that, Lord of the Rings has a gigantic cast, right? I mean, not all films have a cast as large with so many kind of really important meaty roles where you see the person for a kind of extended period of time. So yeah, I think it's, I think it's really the film series that all other book adaptations need to be judged against.
The other thing we should talk about is the score.
Beautiful. I mean, talk about iconic movie scores.
That is an incredible score.
It is. And I mean, the way he weaves themes in and out, and the way he uses certain instruments to indicate certain areas of Middle Earth and so on. I mean, he I don't know. It's his magnum opus, in my opinion. It's amazing.
That's a great book.
Yep.
And great movies.
Yep.
So it's like a good and a bad, but there's also a third category, which is this is a really good book and this is a really good movie. And they're supposed to be related to each other, and maybe they are on 2 or 3 points, but also no, this is not the same story. And I'm thinking specifically of Howl's Moving Castle, which was a 1986 book by Diana Wynne Jones, who is my children's books idol. She's a wonderful, wonderful writer. She's incredibly able to capture people in very subtle, underhand kind of ways. And then the movie, which is a Miyazaki movie, is absolutely fantastic, like every other one of his movies, but kind of takes a few core ideas and then does what he wants to do with it. So Howl's Moving Castle is a book about a girl who's been cursed to be 93 years old. And so she goes to find her fortune in this moving castle. And, there's essentially a deadbeat wizard who lives in the castle and his fire demon who runs everything. And the demon says, I'll take off your curse if you can take off mine. And she has to sort of totter around as an old woman, coming into her own. Like she was a shy girl, and now as an old woman, she's just like, I gotta say whatever I want. I'm an old woman. And she has a great time with it. Along the way, she finds out she has magic, that her habit of talking to things, inanimate things, gives it power. Her love interest, Howl, is essentially a runaway from our Wales into this magical world, who's just like a real dandy, and just is actually just, in the end, a fairly good-hearted if vain man. So that's the story. And the movie kind of has, it's a girl who's been cursed into being an old woman. And Howl himself is just suave and handsome and brooding man who like is really generous and gentle with her, and like at the same time there's a war going on. And on the whole, it's just a very, very different story. It's an anti-war story. It's love conquers all kind of story. It's not this kind of like every character in here is a little bit of a mess, but we love them kind of story. So it's interesting how you can take a great book, make a great movie, and have them have this very thin line of connection. I would watch the movie and read the book if you guys get a chance. I would ask you to do it simultaneously if possible, because then you get like exactly how different it is, but that's probably not very useful advice. So just read the book, watch the movie, read the book. It doesn't matter either way. They're only kind of related.
I mean, in the end, it always felt like to me that Miyazaki got some character names and then went and made his own movie.
A little bit, yeah.
And like that's fine, but there's a way in which it doesn't feel like an adaptation of a book anymore, right? It just feels like the adaptation of an idea.
I wonder a lot about what gets not lost in translation, but what gets interestingly confused in translation. Because of course this is a British book that is made into a Japanese movie, and then most Americans who came across it, it's redone for American voice actors. So like Howl is Christian Bale, and I don't know where anyone would ever think from reading the book that that's Christian Bale. So it's an interesting adaptation circle.
I have to say though, I think it is one of Miyazaki's most beautiful films. Like,
oh, it's gorgeous.
However it happened, he ended up with some of the most amazing visuals in that movie, and it's interesting to me. I read the book after seeing the movie, so in my mind, the two have always been pretty separate, right? Because I encountered the movie first, and I think that makes me very comfortable with saying, yeah, they're two, like they kind of share a title maybe, but they're completely different. And I think what's always interested me about the movie is just how beautiful it is. Because as you say, it's still an anti-war film, and it's like many of his others, it has a pretty strong environmental message. But it's beautiful. It's just, there are scenes in there that I can think of that are just some of the most beautiful scenes that have ever been committed to film, in my opinion. But like you say, completely different than the book. Like you can't get much more different.
Maybe his story is very different, and his story has more of a point than hers did. And I think he did that partly by making these beautiful images. That's just gorgeous, and yet really makes you think about like what is magic, what is power, and what will you use it for, is what he's asking you, very bold face. Whereas Howl's Moving Castle is much more asking you like, who could you be if you felt like you could be anything, like, and if you felt like you were unable to say something, what happens if you say something, which is a much more personal message and a much more book message. Mm-hmm. So they're like fraternal twins. You know, it's like this is the same or similar ideas, same or similar things, but like they don't look exactly the same.
All right, so very important concluding question. If you could have any book adapted to film, what book would it be?
To film or to a TV show?
Let's do film since we got on a film kick.
I would like to see a really solid Dickens or a really solid Vanity Fair. You know, something that has a lot of twists and turns to it that haven't been addressed in kind of the easy adaptation. So I'd want it to be a 3-book series of an adaptation of Vanity Fair. I think it would make it for a really good movie. Done right. 3 movies. Done right.
I think it would definitely have to be a trilogy because Vanity Fair is complicated as a book. It's long. And has a lot in there that can't be cut.
Yeah. Which Victorians did not know when to shut up. What about you?
So I would actually have one of my favorite young adult books adapted. My favorite is The Blue Sword by Robin McKinley. In many ways, I actually think it would be the perfect book to be adapted by Miyazaki because it hits a lot of the kind of the important tropes that Miyazaki likes. Has really, really strong central female character. It has a love story that is very secondary and very much about a kind of two people coming together and realizing they are stronger together rather than apart. And has some very charming animals and creatures that I would love to see his studio animate. So I would argue that The Blue Sword needs the Miyazaki treatment.
I would love his moments of stillness in his films, like the moments of stillness plus a desert setting.
Yeah, I think that being able to embrace that desert setting would be stupendous and would be amazing because he does so much with water, right? And so having him having to translate water into sand or water against sand or something like that, I think would be amazing. His use of color and all of the color that's kind of in Damar, I think would be, I'd love to see that. And if you would like more conversations about books, you should like this video. You should subscribe to our channel. We have a whole slew of videos coming up about various books, mostly books that have meant a lot to us over the years. And I think a lot of these videos are going to be really helpful going into the holidays. We're trying to recommend books that will appeal to broad audiences so you can buy these books for yourselves or for loved ones. So tune in, keep watching, like, subscribe, and we will see you eventually.
And don't forget to shop local. Your local businesses will appreciate it a great deal. And if your local shop happens to be Readers Books, we are available. Our phone number here is 707-939-1779. We're at readersbooks.com. You can also check us out on Facebook, and our Instagram handle is Sonoma Readers Books. We'll see you next time. Bye. Okay.